Today is the 4th of September 2018. We survived Labor Day, and we are now entering, in some 60 or so days from now, Election Day. Perhaps the most important election of our lifetime. So, Bob Woodward has, and Bernstein, they have decided it's time to have Trump removed for incompetence and an inability to discharge the duties of the presidency. That he's had, that the whole government is chaotic, has had a breakdown, and this is all based on sources, interviews, sources, and of course, none of it is going to be revealed as to who, and I'm sure that we'll never see the tapes, or we might see snippets of tapes. But the key thing is, how can a guy be incapable when he got into the presidency on his own, and he survived an all-out assault from the CIA, the FBI, the media? I mean, he's been hit more. He's been hit in more ways and more times and more places than anybody I've known in history who was president of the United States. So that makes him obviously not incapable, a basket case, a psychotic, unable to discharge the functions of the presidency. The fact that he lasted this long, it refutes that whole argument. So this is an escalation in this situation. Now, the second escalation that's taking place is that Robert Mueller is not backing down to let the elections pass. He's not winding up the case. He's now going to be expanding his case. And not only that, but they farmed out to the southern jurisdiction of New York, the jurisdiction known as the Pancake House, because they get people to flip and then lie. They're going to start going through all of Trump's business connections, business deals. If you find a close associate of Trump who has some problems, potential problems legally, then you go after them. If you can't frame them up, or you can get after them, then you can get them to lie. And this is what they did with the lawyer Cohen. So this whole thing is moving in that direction. However, as all of this is going on, we have a very big event, a very big development has taken place in China. You don't hear about China much, except that they're bad people. They want to take over the world, and they're not American, and they're bad people, and they're you can't trust them. They'll steal all your secrets, and on and on and on and on and on. And we gotta stop China. They're taking over, right? That's all you hear about China, and their huge industrial development program for the world is nothing but a new form of debt slavery, a new form of imperialism. And this is all you hear in the media. Now, just about every African head of state, 53 of them, representing just about all the African nations, were in Beijing this weekend, going into today. And they were there for a conference on the industrial development of Africa. And what Xi Jinping said, Africa is on a fast train of Chinese development. And Xi Jinping also laid out the conditions for the development of Africa. No interference in the internal affairs. No attempt to control the governments, get political advantage. That China will work with whatever system of government people have. Total respect for the sovereignty of each nation in Africa. Total respect for the sovereignty of each nation in Africa. An extra $60 billion is being put forward. Massive numbers of educations of agricultural scientists to improve the food production in Africa. And infrastructure on a massive scale, because as you develop the infrastructure in Africa, the transportation infrastructure, then you have the means to connect the farms to the cities. And that means the food can get out of these farms without being going rotten, and can get to the cities and can get to market. That's the whole point about infrastructure. You don't have infrastructure, your food don't get to market. It's very hard to get things to the market, to trade. So there's a tremendous amount. Now most of these developments go back to the conference in Paris that Lyndon LaRouche held on the industrialization of Africa. Can you believe that the LaRouche movement was actively involved in campaigning for the industrial development of Africa? And to that effect, we were discussing at that time setting up an international development bank using the oil funds, using all of the extra funds that were floating around to recycle those funds into the development of Africa. That was in 1976. And it's precisely in that situation in Paris when LaRouche was supposed to meet the president of France. He was staying at the Somali embassy. He was about to meet the president of France on this question of the International Development Bank, when the president of France received a phone call from then U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who said to the president of France that meeting with LaRouche would be a casus belli, or a cause for problems between the U.S. and France, and he made a very big issue of it, and so the meeting never took place, and LaRouche had to, become diplomatically ill. So anyhow, so that's how far back this goes, and now the Chinese are committed to the full industrial development of Africa. And what does this mean? It means that Africa is going to be industrialized. It means that Africa will become the world's greatest food exporter. Africa will become a rich middle-class country, not necessarily that rich, but a middle-class societies will take over Africa. Okay, and the world will grow economically dramatically. And when I present this to most Americans, a lot of Americans are horrified. No, that's like Obama said. They're like Obama said, if Africa did this, they would boil over. The planet would boil over. So Obama was totally opposed to this. And so this is now reality. And what this means, and I'll just tell you what this means. It means 500 years of European colonialism is finished. 500 years of this crap is over. Including the post-war, post-70s Bretton Woods system, which a post-70s floating exchange system of IMF conditionalities. But if you go to another part of the world, Argentina and Brazil and other nations, they're being tremendously attacked by financial assault, capital flight, and attacks on their currencies, and to the point that Argentina is in a debt crisis. And the president of Argentina and the finance minister told the population they're going to have to suffer tremendous cuts and massive poverty. But we and the International Monetary Fund can revive a new Argentina, right? That's total bullshit. So you have a crisis in Latin America because you don't have Africa coming in. I mean, you don't have the China coming in to develop Latin America. I mean, yes, you do have China coming in to develop the rail infrastructure for Brazil and for the transcontinental rail infrastructure so that you could start to really develop Latin America. But you have instability because the leaders, the leaders that would be working with that, to a large degree, have been removed. Dilma Rousseff and Lula in Brazil, Kirchner and Cristina Kirchner in Argentina, Correa in Ecuador, and so forth. There's a tremendous pressure to overthrow the nationalistic tending people and put in bankers' toadies. But there will be a massive revolt in Latin America against that. But we are witnessing the end of 500 years of European colonialism. Okay, which we fought an American Revolution against, and are still fighting and we still have to fight another revolution against. And this is all happening while Donald Trump is in the White House. So what's going on with Donald Trump? Okay, Donald Trump has this casket called NAFTA, which is oppressing the United States, oppressing Mexico, oppressing Canada. NAFTA. NAFTA is not a trade deal. Primarily, it's a system of rules and regulations that give the financial investors, to give the flow of capital and transnationals control. But the deeper issue of NAFTA is that that if Canada and the U.S. were to develop, they could only do so in the context of developing all of Latin America. But to do that requires that you expand Canadian and American industry, that you expand North American industry. But what NAFTA did was the opposite. It sent U.S. jobs down to Mexico. It bankrupted the farmers and the small business people in Mexico, and that's why they were forced to come across the border. This created a massive lowering of pressure on wages. NAFTA was used to threaten all the unions into submission. NAFTA, the threat of moving your plant south to the border for cheaper wages. Meanwhile, Mexico is not being developed. There's no industrial development in Mexico. It's all drugs and tourism and slave labor, or low-wage labor. Now, if you had really proceeded with the economic plans that were ended after Portillo was president in '82, which included nuclear power plants, you would have seen a massive increase of exports from the United States and from Canada to Mexico. So you can't develop the United States without an export market for development, and which is what China is doing. They're developing China on the basis of the development of the rest of the world. That's how you expand. You have to expand the whole pie. You can't just fight over what part of the pie you're going to trade in. And so NAFTA was implicitly and explicitly designed to create a post-industrial world of low wage, exploiting the labor, exploiting low wages, but not developing the world, not developing Mexico, not developing. And then NAFTA became the template for all these other things. So this is what Trump's trying to get out of. And one of the key features of this is the investor state resolution clause in NAFTA, which allows investors and private firms to sue the governments, and puts constraints on the government's ability to act on behalf of their population. Now, Trump managed to get a bilateral agreement with Mexico, and I suspect that when the new Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, comes in as president of Mexico December 1st, that Trump is going to be working with him on a comprehensive expansion and development of Mexico. That is, expanding U.S. exports to Mexico to develop Mexico. I suspect this is what he and AMLO are talking about, because that's the only way to deal with this problem, is to develop Mexico. And the only way to deal with this problem as far as the United States goes is to create the industries in the United States that are going to develop Mexico. So I think this is what's going on, and it's quite something, and it's quite something. So the whole thing with Canada is that Canada does not want to be part of NAFTA if there isn't the investor-state resolution. And so what's happened is that's being used by Congress to go after Trump on NAFTA. Now Donald Trump says he can cancel NAFTA, but it's not clear, because NAFTA involves commerce, which is under Congress's control, but it also involves treaty. It's very complicated. He could probably get away with canceling it, because and force the Congress to have to fight him openly, which would make the congressmen who are doing that very unpopular, because the working class of the United States is very much opposed to NAFTA. They understand that NAFTA is what destroyed their living standards and created this massive refugees coming across the border, which also lowered the wages and so forth. There would be no refugees coming across the border if it wasn't for NAFTA. There would be there would be very few undocumented Mexican workers if it wasn't for NAFTA. Those people were employed. They had jobs. They had farms, small farms. They were bankrupted. They were agricultural products were dumped. Other products were dumped, and they were bankrupted. And where are they going to go? And that is NAFTA. NAFTA was also the basis for all these other trade deals. It's also the basis for a lot of the agreements of the European Union, where you have essentially rules that constrict the development of nations and loots the poor, loots the you create refugees, you loot the refugees. All of this is part of what NAFTA represents, and this is what Trump's trying to deal with. He's trying to break free of it. And I don't know if he's doing it right or what, but that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to break free of it or renegotiate bilateral agreements with Mexico that open the door for the development of Mexico and the United States. But Canada is not really, doesn't really want to go along with that. And that's partly because I think the current government of Canada, which is an extension of the British system, is counting on Trump being removed, and they're playing hardball with Trump, and you have the situation where the head of the AFL-CIO, Trumpka, who indicated he was in favor of getting rid of NAFTA, is now flipped a little bit and said, well, etc. So that's what's going on. So this is now Trump has been referencing William McKinley, the assassinated president of that end of the Lincoln, the people that were part of that Lincoln tradition, that were part of the Grant Lincoln tradition in the Republican Party, and he was assassinated. But he had written a lot on trade and reciprocity and other things of that nature, and so Trump is quoting that, and that's part of what I'm going to be looking into is the McKinley, William McKinley, because he's being referenced a lot by Trump. So now, as we speak, I had the experience of going to Vancouver, Washington, to do put our Trump Can't Do It Alone campaign. And what's happened there is that what I'm noticing is the population, the blue-collar population, is very much pro-Trump. And they're identifying with Trump, not the single issues. and the fight around Trump to get rid of Trump is coalescing a very broad cross section of people who are either evangelicals or working class or Democrats. A lot of them are Democrats. They're coalescing around Trump, and the similar coalescing is going on against Trump. So Trump has become the issue. There are no single issues anymore. Trump is the issue, and this is creating quite a crisis in the U.S. Political situation. And what Trump essentially exudes is a rejection of liberalism, a rejection of liberalism and neoliberalism, whether it's in the financial realm, because he's for fair trade and reciprocity and tariffs and all of that, or whether it's in the social policies. He exudes an anti-liberalism, and it's that anti-liberalism is a strong current in the U.S. population, especially the blue-collar population, and that's what's galvanizing all of this. So that's where we are on that. Now, as we go into this situation, we have a very tense military situation, because a large part of the U.S. establishment is committed to war. And there's a huge battle raging. It spilled over into the United Nations over accusations by the Russians that a false flag was being planned in Syria. And we have a mobilization exposing that false flag and trying to stop it. It's very important that this is being set up, and the Russians are naming the British directly and the White Helmets. So there's a lot going on in that respect. The U.S. is all set to bomb right now, set to bomb Syria to the Stone Age, and the Russians are saying, if you do that, we'll respond. So, and this is related to the Idlib province, where it's the last stronghold of Al Qaeda, Al Nusra as it's called, the friends of the people that did 9/11. And these are the people that the U.S. Is trying to protect. The British are trying to protect. The U.S. are trying to protect, because these are assets. And the policy that the U.S. has had, and is still continuing, even though Trump is president, is to prevent that area from having any stability. Because as soon as you get stability, then things are going to change very rapidly. Things are going to change very rapidly. And Israel right now, the idea was to use these, turn that whole area into an ungovernable Islamic caliphate and terrorism and everything else like that. And then Israel would be the number one power, along with Turkey, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. But that's all changed because of the Russian intervention in 2015. So now everything is shifting, and the conditions are coming into being where it is potentially possible to resolve these things and then bring in the economic development for the region. And also the similar process is going on in Europe. Europe has to trade with Russia and China. Europe has to you can't have sanctions on Europe. You can't have sanctions on European countries with respect to Russia. They need to trade with Russia. Russia needs to trade with them. The whole Belt and Road could give the industrial power of Europe, what's left of it, a tremendous boost, producing goods for export, especially Germany. So you have a big split in Germany between the industrialists and the anti-Russian crowd. And so these are the things that are going on in this very profound political situation. Okay. So we come to this election period, and in the state of Washington, there are 3 districts which the Democrats are seeking to contest. One is the district, the 3rd district, the 5th district, and I believe it's the 6th district, Reichert's old district. And these are the 3 districts, and there are 4 Republicans in this state, 4 Republican congressmen, and 3 of them are being have a potential of going over to the Democrats, and partly because the Republican Party in the state is very weak, and many of the people that support Trump don't like the Republican incumbents. So there is a mobilization going on to get these people to hold their noses and vote Republican, even though they mostly consider themselves independent. Most of the Trump supporters in the state don't consider themselves Republican. They consider themselves, they've always considered themselves either Democrat or independent. And so this is a very this is a battleground right here in the state of Washington. It's a huge battleground, and I'm going to be going out to these areas to organize, to create an environment, because the other thing that's going on is people are terrified of letting their employers know that they voted for Trump. There's a tremendous fear factor because of what the media has done and the social this thing called Trump derangement syndrome. If you're in a workplace and you have some people there with Trump derangement syndrome, then they find out you work with Trump, then they'll disown you if they're a relative. I mean, I'm getting all these reports of people being disowned when they find out that their relative, they're being disowned, disinherited. It's really bad, or lose their job, or just become very difficult to function in your workplace. And so a lot of people will tell me why I don't want my name on any list, because I like what you're doing, I'm for what you're doing, but I don't want my name on the list because I don't want to have trouble. So all of this is being stoked, and it's going to keep being stoked for the next 60 days, and the stress and tension is going to grow, and who knows where this is all going to end up. But if Trump survives and the Congress stays Republican, then Trump will be in a position to start the cleanup.